Issues with mental health are often hidden until it reaches a boiling point and something really bad can happen. We see this in the headlines with school shootings, murder suicides, and there are countless other tragedies we never hear about. Hindsight is 20/20, as they say, and if only, we always say that, we go if only someone recognized they were struggling, if only they told someone, if only they got help. Those are extreme cases, but many more people simply suffer in silence. Our next guest appeared to have it all. She was an intern here at Great Day Houston. She was the nicest young lady, beautiful, an elite athlete, and a student at Rice University, so you know she's smart, okay? What I didn't know is that she was struggling with overwhelming OCD. Getting help encouraged Dr. Cali Werner to change her career path. She's with the OCD Institute of Texas. Now she's counseling others like Katie Higgins, who says reaching out literally saved her life. Good
Man,
morning.
I feel so good every time I come on here.
Oh, wow. No, I remember when you walked in the door, I was like, oh, look at this young lady. She's so honest and she's pure and she's sweet and she's kind. We need her in journalism. But had no idea what you were dealing with. And a lot of times it's because people hide it. And that is the purpose behind having something called Mental Health Awareness Month. That in itself is powerful.
Yeah, well, I think with OCD especially, everyone talks about it as like you keep things neat and tidy, or you like to do things a certain way, and that's just not the presentation of OCD that I had. And so I was ashamed and scared, and I didn't know what I was dealing with.
Because otherwise you were a perfect child.
Right. I tried to be.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because I remember back in, when I first came here, back in 1998, we had done a number of shows on mental health awareness, and one of them was this thing called OCD, which nobody knew about. And there weren't even very many. I think there was one doctor we could locate in town. We were flying people in from other states to talk about it, and we would find people who were dealing with it, who were willing to talk openly about it, because it was just so hard to understand. What was going on in your life? I mentioned you were a former elite athlete.
Yeah, so I was at Rice at the time, and I realized the more success that I got, the more the compulsions came on. So I was doing a lot of tapping and touching of certain surfaces, having to repeat certain actions, and all of it tied to, if I don't do these things, something bad's going to happen. If I don't engage in this behavior or confess to my parents that I might have said something wrong, I'm going to lose this race. And with OCD, you know that it's irrational, you know that it doesn't make sense, but that anxiety comes on so strong that you feel kind of prisoner to the compulsion.
Yeah, it takes over. Yeah.
Right,
and because people still don't get, sometimes you go, okay, if I'm just tapping, okay, well, all right, some people tap, some people, you know, they do their leg, they'll do all kinds of things or have rituals. I know in my head, when I walk, I count in eights, and I attribute that to being in high school band. We marching band, we'd always do, I still do that, but that doesn't mean that you're OCD. And a lot of people sometimes will dismiss what you're talking about by saying, oh, I do that.
Right. Or the amount of times they say, oh, well, yeah, like I double check my lock at night before going to bed. I must have OCD. And
I turn the stove off a couple of times.
And to truly meet diagnostic criteria, it needs to take at least an hour out of your day. And so for me, the rituals were kind of constant at a point where I finally couldn't hide it anymore after this internship, I think. And that's where I finally got appropriate help and changed my career trajectory.
And we say those rituals, it's like, what did you think was going to happen if you did not do those rituals?
I thought that my loved one would get in a car crash. I thought that I would lose a race. I thought that I would go to hell, because there's a form of OCD called scrupulosity, the religious-based fears, and there's 8 subtypes of OCD, and contamination is one, right? Or doing things in a just
Howie
right way.
Mandel was on the show not too long ago, and he talked about that, about touching anything or walking into any room. He thought that he would get, deathly ill.
Yeah, the ones that people don't talk about as much are the intrusive thoughts that come up. So harm OCD, sexual intrusive thoughts, and again, these are irrational, but you feel so inclined to engage in these behaviors to prevent that thing that's completely against your values from happening.
Yeah, and then of course the thing that makes it extra hard is, like, Faith was talking about earlier, that she looked healthy. Get it out of your head. This must be in your head. With OCD, just stop.
Yeah, just stop. Man, if that would have worked, I would have never needed to go into therapy, or I wouldn't have a job either.
Yeah. And Katie, we're going to get to your story in a minute, because you were like the amen corner over here. You're like, that's right, that's right, amen, yeah. All right, so you finally were able to say you have an issue, but it was interesting because even your dad was like, when you be in a race and you think, what if I run in the wrong lane? What if I do this? What if I, as a track runner? And your dad's like, just stay in your lane.
Yeah.
Why can't you just stay in your lane?
One foot in front of the other. You do this all the time. Or I would win a race. I remember I won our conference championships, and I had this intrusive thought that I could have cut a corner. I didn't, But I went up to my coach afterwards and I said, I think we need to go tell the ref that I don't deserve to win this race. And so it really does steal your joy immediately. And again, I knew it was irrational, but the anxiety was so heightened. And so one day I want to write a book called Cutting Corners, just to explain that part of the story.
Yeah, a lot of people do cut corners, right? All right, so exposure response prevention. So it's like, what does therapy look like? What did it look like for you?
Yeah, so one of the things I really struggled with before races was tying my shoes. It got to a point where my coach had to tie my shoes for me because I couldn't get that just right feeling. And so I would tie them over and over again. And so my therapist said, Cali, exposure with response prevention, you have to expose yourself to, you're only allowed to tie your shoes 3 times before you go to this next race.
You're getting shoes with Velcro only now from now on. Right?
That probably would have been the next step.
But that is something that people will do. They'll avoid certain things. That's not a great excuse, but it's like avoidance to not deal with what you think the issue is, and then a new issue pops up.
Exactly. Or the amount of parents that ask me now that I'm a clinician, well, if I just take my kid out of the sport, or if I just stop having them do this, won't it be better? And the reality is no. It tends to always latch on to what you care about and love. And so if you don't get appropriate evidence-based treatment, it's still going to be a struggle. It transferred
to something else.
Totally.
Yeah. And we see this. It helped you because of your experience to kind of refine some of the things that you do. We see this with athletes oftentimes.
Yeah.
You know, they can be a great elite athlete, and then all of a sudden they strike out a few times, or they don't make the goal, or something happens, and it just is a block.
Right. Well, and I think some of that too comes from the pressure, right? Like anytime with any mental illness, stress tends to exacerbate symptoms. And my research was on 20 Olympians. I interviewed them about their post-Olympic blues experiences, and the ones that tended to struggle were the ones that had their full identity in their sport, right? And so the pressure was more heightened, and that leads to an athlete that's predisposed to OCD engaging in those rituals versus, can we lower some of that stress? Can we get them to do some exposures and teach them that my coach used to always say, it's a party out there, Cali.
Yeah. It's interesting because how many times do we hear about, like, what's your ritual? We just throw it out there like it's something fun and cute, right? They go, oh, I always do blah, blah. For some of them, it's probably like, oh, I always do this because they really believe that if they don't, something bad will happen.
And so what I've done with that research is if an athlete is predisposed to anxiety, we're really trying to encourage pre-performance routines instead of superstitious behaviors. Because for those that aren't anxious, we know superstitions can be helpful. They bring confidence, but for those that have that anxiety, it actually hurts their confidence.
Yeah, OCD can impact anyone, but do you find it's heightened among people who are maybe elite in something, the good student or the great athlete, or, you know?
Yeah, I would say 90% of my patients are type A individuals, and I think that's where we get it wrong as a community. We say, oh, when people say I'm so OCD, what they're really describing is I'm so type A, right? They're not actually describing, oh no, OCD takes it to this next level, and it really becomes debilitating.
What would a parent look for? And because oftentimes if you look, for you talked about more so came on around college time, but and I know Katie will talk about this in a second, but oftentimes it can pop up earlier. What should parents look for? Because I would imagine, just like anything else, the earlier you tackle something, the better the outcome could be.
Yeah, I think some parents are afraid to seek support because they're worried, well, but I don't want to give them a diagnosis if they don't need it. And my answer is you can't be preventative enough. If you get the appropriate therapy, you're never going to regret having them have the skills earlier, because life gets more stressful as time goes on. And so it will exacerbate if they truly have a diagnosis of OCD. But if their kid is getting really stuck with anxiety, with things that other kids aren't getting stuck with, right? If they're coming home and confessing things like, I think I might have cheated on an exam, or I think I might have done this one thing, and they can't really explain what they've done, good signs that there might be a predisposition to OCD in there.
Yeah, the last time I saw you, you were Cali Werner, licensed counselor. Now you're PhD.
Yes, it's so weird.
So congratulations on that. And I feel like this is my child.
Oh, please.
You're expecting a baby.
I am. We're due in September. I mean, I still remember coming here and you giving me a going away cake with Great Day Houston intern. That was really, really hard to step away from. But yeah, we've got a baby on the way. And if you would have asked Cali, who was struggling with severe OCD at that point in time, if I would have ever gotten married, if I would have ever had a baby, I would have said, no way. No, there's no way. And evidence-based treatment changed my life and is why I do what I do now.
Okay.